So does this make me look more official? Of course, then I can do this. Oh my god. And this week, the news. That was terrible. Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Motley Stew Show, where we try to take one of the bigger stories out of news and politics each week, take a deep dive into it, get outside the echo chamber, and see what's really going on and why should we care. Now this week we're stepping away from politics and we're actually going to look at a news story that has to do with what we feel is the right age that someone can actually take control over their own life, literally. Over the years we've heard battles over assisted suicide laws. These are generally for people who are terminally ill, who have been deemed that they will pass away, but when it happens, between now and then will be a vicious period of suffering. Sometimes just days and weeks, sometimes months, maybe even years. It is a near certainty that they will pass away due to the condition that they have, and that it will be painful along the way. So as people with those conditions have begun to speak up, they've been declaring that they want the right to take themselves out of that suffering, to take themselves off of that path, and basically end it before that happens, in a humane way. And basically it goes back to people like Dr. Kevorkian, who was helping people do this, with a machine that he invented. And it's very similar to the idea of what they use right now in lethal injections, which is a cocktail. It takes 3 different chemicals, 3 different drugs, puts them into your system one after the other, and slowly lulls you into sleep and then pass away. So while we've been having that battle for adults, this particular story is about how young can someone be and still make that choice. This is Julianna Snow. She was born on August 25th, 2010. She's currently just past 5 years old, and she has a condition known as Charcot-Marie tooth disease. Don't know if I pronounced that first name correctly, but the disease was named after the 3 different scientists who discovered it over 130 years ago. Now the basic premise of what this disease is doing to her is that if you imagine everybody's nerves as being an electrical wire, you've got that rubber coating that goes around the wire and the wire itself is inside. Now her coating is perfectly fine, but the nerves inside the coating are deteriorating. And the condition is progressive. It will not stop, it will just continue moving until it eats away everything. Now her mom, Michelle Moon, is a neurologist, and her dad, Steve Snow, is an Air Force pilot. And her mom noticed something was weird early on. When Julianna was missing certain developmental milestones, she wasn't sitting up on her own, and she wasn't walking at the same time that other kids usually do. Now of course doctors at first said that's okay, some kids just develop late. But her being a neurologist kind of felt something was going on. Now originally she thought she might have a condition called spinal muscle atrophy, which does somewhat the same things in terms of degeneration, but to have that you actually have to get that gene from both parents. And she was tested and found that she didn't have it. So that ruled out that particular condition. But then Michelle remembered something very odd about her husband, and that he had a kind of unique way of walking because he had a certain condition with his feet, very high arches. And then she remembered that this other condition, known more colloquially as CMT, can show up in certain people in that way if it's a very minor case. They had him tested and found out it was true. He did have CMT, and his minor case had been passed on to Julianna into a life-threatening fatal case. Now after they first discovered that she had this condition, what was going on is those muscles were degenerating that were allowing her to walk on her own. But very quickly it developed into the same muscles that were allowing her to breathe. And then she had to be fitted for a back brace because she had developed scoliosis. Now when she was 2, she could use a walker to get around, but by the time she was 4, she couldn't even sit up unsupported, and she couldn't eat because those same muscles in her throat and everything else weren't working. So she couldn't chew and she couldn't swallow, and she has to be fed through a tube going into her stomach. But out of all those things, if that wasn't bad enough, the worst thing was the mucus that was settling inside of her lungs. This was causing her pneumonia. And every time she got sick from that, what they'd have to do is she'd go into the hospital and they would have to shove a tube down her throat while she was awake, pass her gag reflex, and then suck out that mucus. It's an incredibly painful procedure, and most adults or kids can usually be put under or somewhat sedated, but because of her condition, she couldn't. She had to be awake and alert through the whole thing. And the nurse who actually did that procedure on Julianna said most kids will scream, but Julianna couldn't. She didn't even have enough energy to do that. She could only cry. So at a certain point, the doctors came to Michelle and Steve and said, the next time this happens, the next time Julianna gets really sick and comes to the hospital, it might not be worth what we're going to have to do. Because to bring her back from the edge again, they're going to have to do riskier and riskier procedures, which are going to leave Julianna in worse and worse condition, even if she does survive them. And they're going to be painful. So they gave the decision to the parents, saying, you might want to think about end-of-life decisions. Do you want her to be resuscitated? Do you want her to be saved? Do you even want to bring her into the hospital when she gets sick again? Because it likely will be her last time. Now, it's hard enough for parents, and being a parent myself of 2 young boys, I can't even imagine thinking about this decision. But Michelle and Steve took a unique approach. Knowing that Juliana had been sick her whole life, this is kind of what she's known. Since she was old enough to remember, it's been the hospital, it's been the illness. She knows what's going on. So instead of choosing to make that decision for her, they gave it to her. And they asked her, what do you want to do? When you get sick again, do you want us to take you to the hospital? And she said no. Now, growing up in a religious family, in a religious household, she said, I'm choosing heaven. Now, Michelle tried to make sure that she explained exactly what she meant, that she was going to go to heaven alone, that her parents weren't going to go with her, her older brother, who's 2 years older, wasn't going to be able to go with her, that she was going to have to take this journey by herself, and it could be very scary, and it could be painful at the end. And Juliana says she knows all that. She totally understands it, and she doesn't want to go back to the hospital. She doesn't want to go through the same procedures, the tube being forced down her throat, or whatever is worse than that. She doesn't feel that the pain that she goes through is worth it, and the condition of life that she has now is going to be worsened. She doesn't feel it's worth it. And that brings me to a point, what she's in now. Because of the fact that she can't walk, and she also has to be moved around on a portable bed that vibrates so that the mucus that's settling in her lungs doesn't solidify and form. Here's a little video of what I mean.
I did it.
And also, like I said before, she can't eat. Everything has to be fed to her through a tube in her stomach. To try to give her even the sensation of taste, they will rub food across her lips. Now, at 4 years old, she made the decision to not go to the hospital. She made the decision to die at home. And since then, her and her family have agreed with that decision and decided, let's just make the best of the days that she has left. Now, that's not to say that they've given up on taking care of her and making sure that she doesn't get sick, because even a cold is likely going to kill her. But once Juliana made her opinion clear, Michelle said, and I quote, "So we had to let go of that plan because it was selfish." And the plan she's referring to is obviously taking her back to the hospital. And this is the key point. When somebody has a quality of life that is so low, the question becomes, why are we saving these people? Is it for them or is it for us, the people left behind? Are we having such a hard time letting go that we will put them through what could be a living hell just to save us the sadness? And that seems to be where they've come to. Now, of course, this brings up a huge discussion. Is 4 years old enough to make that kind of decision? Does Juliana really understand what death means? Are her parents being horrible parents? Are they basically, through non-action, murdering their own child? Or are they doing the right thing by respecting Juliana's decision? Now, there are people in the medical field on both sides. A bioethicist by the name of Art Kaplan says it is irresponsible to think that a 4-year-old could have any comprehension of what death really means. That kind of knowledge, that kind of awareness of your own mortality doesn't develop in children until they're 9 or 10. Yet Dr. Chris Feutner, who knows Art Kaplan and respects him very much, disagrees. He says to look at Juliana's situation and to disregard the experiences that she's been through over the last 2 or 3 years and how that's changed her, how that's matured her, is irresponsible in itself. And personally, I have to agree. I don't think maturity comes directly from the number of years you've been alive. It comes from the life experience. A child growing up in a very stable home has a different life experience than a child who grows up in a war-torn country. By 5 years old, that war-torn child is going to have a fully different outlook on life and a fully different outlook on mortality than the child who grew up in a very stable, welcoming, warm home. Now, the end of the story isn't actually over at the moment. Over 15 months ago, Juliana and her family came to that decision, and since then, she's still alive. Now, could it be the fact that relaxing by letting go of control and basically saying when this happens, it'll happen, is actually helping her physical health? Who's to say? That's a whole nother discussion of mind over matter and positive thinking and the effect it has on the body. But that's not what the question is this week. The question this week is, when do you think it is appropriate to respect a child's decision about their own end-of-life choice? Is 4-year-old too young? Does her life experience come into play? Or do we stick with the law which says you have to be 18 years old to sign off on your own advance directive, and until then, the parents have to make that choice for them? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. So thanks again for watching another episode of the Motley Stew Show. If you haven't subscribed to the show yet, or to the daily vlogs that I've been doing, you can do so on either of those things right here. You can also like, favorite, or share this video with anyone you think will actually love to jump in the discussion. Stay tuned for next week, and as always, here's one of the kids.
Tractor?
What kind of gun is that?
A toot gun.
It's a toot gun.
Logan, are you excited?
Yeah.
Yeah? Can you show Mom how you jump?
Oh.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah, we put it away. Just show me how you jump in the playroom. Jump over. Jump. Good one.
She challenges them on their ideas, not because she's trying to prove a point or to try to win over them, but she's trying to show them the respect of her intelligence and the facts that she knows to be true. Now, next to him, one of the people everybody already knew was going to be there is Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont. Now, Bernie is the only independent in the current Senate, and he calls himself a democratic socialist, which is one of the biggest things that the GOP is using against him because they equate socialism to communism, and it's the Red Scare all over again.